Hi, good evening, folks. You're all very welcome to tonight's lockdown chats. This is a very special episode as we're doing it all about one of County Clare's Antarctic heroes, Ernest Shackleton, and myself produced a graphic novel a couple of years ago, and we're going to give you an insight how we did it and all the people involved. And we also have a special guest from the Shackleton Museum in Athy, so we'll get some insight into the man himself and all about the museum in Athy. So first of all, guys, I just get to give you an introduction to yourselves. So Gavin, how are you, sir?
I'm good, David. Thank you very much. Gavin McCumiskey here. So, yeah, I in my real job, I work with Coca-Cola. I've worked with Coca-Cola for 20 years. But outside of that, the creative streak kicked in a few years back, and I started writing little short stories for comic books, and I self-published a couple of comics called Innocent Tales, and that's how I met David originally. David drew one of the stories in one of my Innocent Tales books, and then it was David that pitched the whole Shackleton idea. And yeah, after many months of hard work, many months of hard work, David.
That's it. Actually, we're still talking, so we didn't fall out.
Yeah.
The experience wasn't too bad.
No, I have to say, I suppose what struck me about the whole idea of doing a graphic novel for Shackleton was that you see in the younger generation now, people they're not picking up the big Lord of the Rings books anymore. They're not picking up the big thesis and reading through thousands upon thousands of words. They want something that's a little bit more accessible. And I thought, doing a book like Shackleton in the graphic novel format was very accessible to younger readers. I thought it was a fantastic idea to do it in that format, and yeah, so glad we done it.
Yeah, no hassle. Listen, I'll just go through everyone on the chat, and we'll circle back down with the questions and we'll go back into it. So Alice, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Just give everyone a quick introduction to yourself, please.
Okay, well, I'm a graphic designer and illustrator for, I do a little bit of comics on the side, but my day job, I'm a graphic designer and illustrator for more mainstream book publishing. So I do book cover design and manuscript setting and things like that. And this year I was able to illustrate my first children's book, which is very exciting. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Very good. Yeah, we'll just go through the group and go into a bit more detail. So Paula, how are you?
Hi there, Dave. Thanks very much for inviting me on. It's good to see you.
Ah, yeah, great to see you. We a lot of emails going back and forth the last few months, and one or two phone calls.
Oh, that's for sure. So my name is Paula Elmore, and I've worked in book publishing almost all my life. I kind of fell into it almost by accident, which is not really the way you would do it these days, but I can tell you more about that later if you like. But I had the very great fortune to be editor of the Collins Press when yourself and Gavin came along with the idea for the Shackleton graphic novel, because Con Collins, the managing director, was hugely into Antarctic exploration. And because his great success story was that he had been looking for someone to write the Tom Crean story for him. And Michael Smith had been looking for a publisher to publish the Tom Crean story that he had already written. So it was through Tom Crean that the Collins Press got into a lot of Antarctic publishing. And when your book came along, it just slotted brilliantly in with the list. And it was very different then from the production point of view, because I was a production editor for the Collins Press. So not only I didn't do just the editorial side of things, but also the book production end. So that's actually my zen place to go to. I love it because it's so rigorous. It's either right or it's wrong. And your book presented some very different challenges, but it was very enjoyable to work on.
That's what I like to do. I like challenging people, Paula. You should know that by now. Well, I challenge my wife every single day, so you're lucky you're a bit of distance away. Yeah, so listen, just from my point of view, my story in Shackleton actually started with Michael Smith as well. So I launched my very first children's book called Do Fish Wear Pajamas with a friend of mine, Mario Currigan. and we produced this children's book, and we launched it at a festival in Kildare Town called One Book, One Town. And that festival was all about reading, all the children reading a book, and they all kind of presented the book, and members from the book, hopefully, like you get authors and illustrators and stuff, to come visit. And that particular year when we launched our first book, Michael Smith, the kids were all doing actually Tom Crean, Iceman. And so I was in, now I did know about Tom Crean, but to my embarrassment, I didn't know much about Ernest Shackleton. Like most people, I kind of thought he was an English explorer, and that's a big thing that people don't realise. And when I found out he was from County Kildare, where I was from, and I didn't know much about him, I was kind of embarrassed. And I went to lunch with Michael Smith and a few teachers and few people involved in the festival, and they were all asking Michael loads of questions, and I was like, I couldn't chime in, and so I made myself. After meeting him, I said, right, I have to read one of his books. So if I ever meet the man again, I'd be able to join in conversation, and that was it. I started reading Tom Crean, Unsung Hero, and everything just changed. I was just blown away by these characters. Just for myself and the kind of comic book thing, people are into superheroes and all these crazy characters, but I just went, this story's just here. This story about Ernest Shackleton is just amazing. And not long after that, then I got involved with a toy library with a woman called Trina Kine from Kildare County Council, and she asked me to do a project with kids in Castledermot, and we ended up doing it on their local hero, which was Ernest Shackleton. And so we did the book Shackleton, the Boss, which is Collins. All of these books are Collins Press. So we did Shackleton, the Boss with the kids, and we're workshopping with the kids and trying to get kids to illustrate the story and stuff. And we had this thought about, why are we illustrating a book that's already illustrated? Why don't we do it into a comic book form? So we decided to do that then, and we split the class up with the desks, and we had I think we did 6 tables, and we split them all up. We covered 3 chapters of the book, which was the James Caird section, the rescue of the book. And I have to credit a man called Owen Kirk, who's the teacher of the school. He was the one that actually put me onto the James Caird story, or at least that nugget of the story, because he said to me, this is the most amazing part of it, that and it's mainly overlooked. And I largely believe that the reason for that is because of Frank Hurley's photographs. So everyone's familiar with the amazing iconic photographs from Frank Hurley and all the story that he documented. Now there's loads that were lost, and anyone knows the story knows that. But the few that survive, people know the story from those photographs and want to know more. So my kind of approach to it was to fill in the gaps between the photographs. So in my book, I use as much Frank Hurley references as I could. Of course, I made them my own style and did my own kind of version of them. But that was the kind of thought process of it, that I would fill in the gaps in between Frank Hurley's photographs. So that was where my first part, and I ended up doing a notebook and a few illustrations, which I'll hopefully get to show in a few minutes. What I did with them and how I kind of designed some of the characters and stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of where the nugget was kicking around. So myself and Gavin were producing Innocent Tales. So Gavin, you want to tell people a bit more about Innocent Tales and what you were doing at the time?
Yeah, so I suppose, look, I suppose working for a company like Coca-Cola, it's, you know, they have their own vision about what you need to do for them, and I suppose there's always a creative side of me that was hidden away there for many years, and a few years back, and I just took a notion to just start writing stories, pretty much making stuff up, like, you know what I mean? And I know it sounds easy, you're just making stuff up, but I found a short story format a lot easier to get artists like yourself interested in doing with me initially, because I was unknown to people, and largely still am, but like it was easier to do, say, 7-8 page short story with people, and it allowed me to get into the I suppose the creative bug of writing, and that's how I done 3 different issues of that. I think there's about 10 stories across the 3 different issues, and they're all, as you can probably tell from the name of the book itself, Innocent Tales, they're not quite so innocent, the stories. It was definitely a replay on words, but I know the story that we done was had a quite good twist at the end of it as well, the ghost car story that we done. So
yeah, I just overlooked that the other day. It's like looking at old photographs. I just hate looking at it.
I know, but I thought it was a good wee twist, because you didn't know where that was going, and then obviously that's how I met yourself, David, and then this whole idea of Shackleton came up. And I suppose what like Shackleton was different from what I was doing, because obviously I was fiction that I was doing, and Shackleton is obviously based very much on fact. But I did like that there was still a creative element within, you know, using the facts of the story, but having some sort of creative license around the conversations and things that would have happened, and how people sort of dealt with each other in that situation. And it's funny, I was only thinking about Shackleton a couple of months back in our own current lockdown, because I think one of the themes we tried to sort of make the reader feel throughout the book was how tough it was for everybody there. And in our own mini lockdown, I was saying, like, people are going crazy here. We're locked down. We're not allowed outside the house for 2 or 3 weeks. And then I was going, these guys were stuck on ice for a lot longer than 2 or 3 weeks. You know what I mean? And how did they do it? Like, how tough mentally was it for them to be in that one spot for that length of time? And yeah, it was only a couple of months back I was thinking about that. So.
And 3 months completely in the dark. That stuff just blew me away, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
They had to exercise the dogs. They had to keep them alive, and they had to do all the work and all the chores, all completely in the dark, you know. Yeah, so like we went from the 8-page story to your self-published comic to the 96-page graphic novel, and that was, what were we thinking?
Yeah, it was unknown for us, but you know, and there was times I'm sure we both felt, because we were our own day jobs and our own family life, and you were trying to balance in spending a lot of time doing this work as well. I know myself personally, I started getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to try and get ahead of the day, and the first thing I was doing at 5 o'clock in the morning was washing my face, and then sitting down on a laptop and starting to write for 2 or 3 hours before the kids got up. You know what I mean? And that was the only way that I felt that I could squeeze the time in. And then look, you can do that for so long, and then you sort of get a bit worn out from that, and then you go off it, and then you have David saying, Gav, I need a few more pages here. You know, so but it was a big undertaking. But looking back at it, it's not something that I would run away from. I would definitely do it again, and I suppose we have learned a hell of a lot from doing that, you know.
That's it. It was kind of, and in fairness to Paula in the Collins Press as well, they were the same, because they had never done a graphic novel, so they took a chance on us, and we kind of ran with it, and yeah, it was hard going for us. Yeah, I wouldn't change any of it, you know. So just, Margaret, how are you?
Grand, David, thanks for having me on. It's great to be on a panel talking about Shackleton. It's long overdue, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. And it's great to be on it with Collins's Press as well, because we always got our supplies, polar books, from Collins's Press. So it's great that they're publishing so much on polar exploration as well. And Michael Smith now is a great advocate, definitely, a great writer and promoter of it.
Yeah, so just give everyone an introduction what you do, Margaret.
Yeah, well, my background's in heritage, and I took up the job many moons ago. We won't say how long ago, as manager and curator of the Shackleton Museum here in Athy. So my interest is in heritage and is actually getting the word out there, preserving artifacts as well, and getting people in to actually look at them. Unfortunately, the strange times we're in now at the moment, we're doing a lot of virtual, but that's we're taking that on board now as well and getting the word out there.
Very good. So Alice, back to you. How are you, Alice?
That's very well.
Do you remember how we got you involved in the project? And
I'm pretty sure I came on board fairly late stages in the project. I was still fairly new to lettering at that point, but I came in and it was the first kind of major substantial piece of lettering for comics that I had ever done as well, so it was a learning curve for me as well.
I remember, I think if you remember correctly, Gavin, you were going to letter it originally, and we just realised that the amount of work involved, that it was just wasn't going to happen.
I had done a small bit of lettering in my own comics, and that was fine, like doing a couple of pages here and there. But yeah, certainly it was a much different undertaking.
So I think we gave Alice the call out on Irish Comic News. We put up a post on our Irish Comic Creators, the Facebook group, and so Alice, just tell us a little bit more about your journey, what you did in college and what you're doing recently.
Yeah, I think I was in college when I met you. At the time, I was doing a lot of freelance graphic design and branding and things for musicians and things, but I had started attending comic conventions and things like that as well, so I was starting to get a bit more connected with people in the comics scene. So then there's a good comic creator group in Cork as well that I got involved with, so I was learning a lot of like lettering and design for comics from them, and then when I saw the opportunity to get involved with Shackleton, I jumped at the chance, and I've kept going since then.
Very good. Whereabouts did you go to college, Alice?
I went to college in Clonmel in LIT. I studied animation, which is an unusual one, but it gave me a really good creative foundation for all sorts of different media.
Very good. So I remember Paula having, so she did Limerick IT, but in Clonmel. So how was that working? It was a separate school, wasn't it?
Yeah. It all fell under Limerick School of Art and Design, but we were our little Tipperary campus.
Very good. There's loads of stuff happening. There's a cool little one in Athlone now as well. That seems to be absolutely booming. Animation is really doing well, and it's a good starting point for anyone that creative stuff. So you worked for Rogue Comics then after working in Shackleton, didn't you?
Yeah, I got involved with Colin Griffin, wrote and illustrated the Ocean City series. So that's kind of the more recent work I've been doing. I also did lettering and design for The Guards.
Oh, very good.
Now published by Rogue Comics. So those are kind of I have them here, I can show them. So Ocean City is now finished. There's loads of them. There's 6 of them now, 6 issues, which has been a lovely project to work on. Colin is absolutely lovely to work with. And then there's also The Guards 1 and 2. There will hopefully be a 3rd one at some point. So those are kind of the substantial lettering projects that I've worked on.
Very good. We love the guys at Celticon. We love all the Rogue Comic guys. We had them for years. We had 1 or 2 of them last year even. But so after the comics, then you did a few publishing roles, didn't you?
Yeah. I was with Mercier Press for almost 3 years, and with them I was doing a lot of book cover design and manuscript setting and things like that. I have a few of those as well. I can show you. I got to illustrate a few of them, which was lovely. Those kind of books I've done. Yeah, just loads of. If you
Very good. Now, just tell us a bit of the process of that. How does it work? Or do you, I'll ask Paula about the editing side of this in a minute, but just from yourself and book designer, like how do you approach a certain book? Do you have to read all the books? Do you just read the synopsis, or what happens? Or
it is a lovely job to work on. It is one of those things that, you know, it's hard to believe people get paid to make books look pretty. I wouldn't necessarily read a book cover to cover when I'm given the manuscript. I would usually read a few chapters from the beginning, a few from the middle, a few from the end to get a good taste, and I'll be in discussion with the commissioning editor and the general manager to see what ideas are presented, and then I'll be in discussion with the author usually as well. So yeah, there'd usually be a bit of back and forth among the team within the publisher and with the author as well, and whatever other creators are involved. So yeah, not much more to say about it.
Oh, no, very good. No, it's just from myself. Like, I've done a few of my own self-publishing covers, but I've done a few for other people as well. But it's a hard thing to do. It's very hard, and you're being very modest there of your ability there, because it's a very, very hard thing to do.
It is a very enjoyable job.
Yeah, it must be high pressure as well, though. Was it?
There's a little bit of that. When I first started, I was terrified, and like going to bookshops and seeing your work on bookshelves and things. It was daunting, but very exciting at the same time. So the excitement definitely overweighed any concerns and worries.
Very good. So Paula, how's it work in the editing world? Do you get handed the books, or is there views going through them, or?
Pretty much as editor, by the time the script comes to me, it's the author has written the entire book and has revised it as well. Because
Paula, I would actually like to apologise to you for my lack of understanding of present and past tense in my writing.
Listen, as I keep saying to my authors, if everybody wrote perfectly, sure, I would have no work to do. That's what I'm there for. But there are different sorts of editing. There's a structural or a developmental copy edit. Now, mostly that would be done by an author directly with a freelance copy editor, because you're trying to get the book to as finished a state as you can. By the time it lands on the desk of an editor who's working in-house, they'll be doing a close copy edit. So it's a very close read of the script. And most people think it's just tidying up typos and grammatical errors and punctuation, but there is much more to it than that, because you're looking out for bias in the language. And it's something that guys have to watch out for in particular. I mean, it's as simple as, have you used the word chairman instead of chair or chairperson? Have you used mankind instead of humankind? And I came across an interesting one a couple of years ago that might actually gain traction again after Brexit. There is an argument that Ireland should not be considered to be geographically part of the British Isles, that in fact the British Isles should be called the North Atlantic Isles. So that kind of bias in language, it's inherent in language, and we have to watch out for it. Has the language an author used, is it going to cause offence to a potential part of the readership, for instance? We also look out potentially for libel. Very rare that would happen in a book on Shackleton, because you can't libel the dead, and everybody involved in the story, unfortunately, has long since passed. Editorially, your book was actually fairly straightforward, because of the nature of it, there's relatively little text, so very little text correction was required. I had to keep an eye on where the illustrations and the text marrying together well. I think there was one particular image possibly where the language was saying one thing and the text was, or the picture was sort of indicating something else. We just had to make sure that the two were married together. It was the production end of things that made your book really, really interesting, because when you give your script to a publisher, traditionally what happens is, and Alice, you would know more about this even than me with your work with Mercier, the publisher takes on with doing everything. You've written the book, that's all you generally need to do. The publisher will get it copy edited, they'll get the text designed, they'll get the cover designed, they'll get the book printed and do all of that. but you were presenting us with essentially what were finished pages. And I think the biggest technical challenge, and just let me grab a page here. I don't know if you can see that. Some of the text there is printed on a background. That's fine. But the text that's printing black on a white background, that was tricky. Because a book like this, we were printing it litho because the print run was long enough. So it's been printed on a physical press. This isn't being printed digitally. So it prints in what's known as CMYK, cyan, yellow, magenta, and black or key. That's what the K stands for. And if the black text is made up out of those four colors, it makes registration incredibly difficult for the printer because they're very fine lines. And if the registration is slightly out, the text is going to get fuzzy. So they needed that to be black only. Alice, I can see you nodding your head there.
I remember that problem.
Yeah. I don't know how you solved it, but thank you.
I think David, did you solve that in the end?
I did, and that was a bit of a nightmare. And I tell you the background, and you're going to be slightly embarrassed, Paula, but please don't. We were right down to the wire. So I remember we wanted to have it out for the centenary for Easter. So the book we wanted out for Easter, 2016, and we were right down. We had all the artwork done, we had all the lettering done. We'd signed off all that, and he had sent it to the printer. And now you told me, and you said, "Look, this is fairly critical. If there's any issues now, you have to come back and sort it out." And this is the story. This is no word of a lie. My uncle died, and we were actually walking behind to the funeral home when I got the phone call. And this is no word of a lie. I'm not trying to make anyone feel awkward. I literally got the phone call to say this issue had come through, and we're right down to the wire. And I was walking behind the car going to the graveyard for my uncle's funeral, and this is how critical this was. So I remember, Paula, you sent me, was it Greg, one of your friends, your designer friends?
Oh, Glenn of Fairways Design, yeah.
Yeah, Glenn sent us a little video of how to fix it. And in the end, it was actually quite easy to do. So what I actually did, Alice, was I actually worked a Photoshop, copied the style of a Photoshop layer, and went into every single text layer and put that in. So it was like pure black, so it had just the black color, and I had to figure all out, and I had to test every single page. Luckily, there's a way of doing it in InDesign, and that was another thing, Paula. I'll talk to you about that in a second. But yeah, that was a last minute thing, and literally had to go to the funeral, not drink, did whatever I needed to do. I said, right, I need to go now, and I stayed there until about 6 or 7 that evening and headed on then, and we worked through the night, fixing all those edits. But at the start it was very daunting because it was a whole 96 page, and but anything I've done since then, I've made sure that that's there. But yeah, like we were lettering and stuff in Photoshop, which is probably not the right way to do things either. Like if it's in InDesign, we wouldn't have this problem. But again, we didn't know what we were doing, and we were trying to figure it all out. But yeah, just from my point of view, Paula, from the editing, you picked up some lovely little things. I remember a few little funny stories. One thing you said to me was about penguins. Do you remember this?
No.
The penguins on Elephant Island. So there's one of the things on Elephant Island. I drawn the elephant seals, and I had a few king penguins, which were from Antarctica. I'd done all my research. I'd done all the bits and pieces, and then I get this email from Paula. It says there's no king emperor penguins on Elephant Island. I was like, oh, I did all the research. Yeah, they're in Antarctica or whatever. I said, not at Elephant Island. So I had to find out then. I actually messaged the Shackleton Appreciation Society group, and it was actually Eugene Furlong, who had actually been to Antarctica, another chap from Cork. Margaret, you know Eugene, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so
Great character.
actually Eugene came to the rescue, and Eugene was actually quite influential for me with the Collins Press as well, because Eugene used to call into Con and have a coffee with Con and ask him what's going on, and he was kind of taking our side and sticking the book across and saying, "Oh, you need to give these guys a chance," and whatever, you know. We're working away, but yeah, Eugene came to the rescue and told me that they were actually chin-strapped penguins, the little guys with the little white thing, and they look like they're wearing a helmet. So I completely redraw all the penguins. And another one, this is one I actually still can't believe you picked up on. But I think it was the title page of chapter 7. So I had the carpenter sawing wood, and Paula picked up. He's right-handed, hammering there. He's right-handed here. He's right-handed here, and he's left-handed on the saw on the front. And I was just, that was just so. I wouldn't have thought of that, and I probably should have. But part of the problem for me was you use reference photographs for the positions and work stuff up. So that was, I obviously took a reference picture for someone that was left-handed. I worked that up. Well, we actually had to flip the drawing.
They only brought a left-handed saw with them, no?
I was trying to get you to write that in as well, actually. Yeah. So right-handed hammer, left-handed saw. But yeah, that was another little crazy editing thing. That was just like, my God, I'd never thought of that. But
that can be a problem, Dave, actually, with when you're dealing with very old pictures, because if they're glass negatives or if they're glass plates, it's sometimes when they're printed in reverse. And I do remember one time when I was working for Gill and Macmillan, on one of their educational books, there was a picture of Marilyn Monroe, and I thought, this picture's been reversed. So I sent a frantic fax, because it was back in the days before email, saying, which side is Marilyn Monroe's beauty spot on? Is it the left or the right? And the very terse answer came back, it's on the outside. In other words, Paula, don't worry about it, just print the book.
Absolutely. There's some of those little things that are mad. Like I would have, probably as an artist, I probably should have picked that up, but it was just so stuck in it. But it's one of the funny stories that come out of it. Alice, tell us a little bit more about your own personally illustrated book, please.
The new one came out this year. Really rotten rhymes. It's written by Gabriel Fitzmaurice, and it's part of why it was such a lovely book to work on, because when I was little, I grew up on Gabriel Fitzmaurice poems. I had his books when I was like 6 or 7 years old, so it was a pleasure to come in and work on one of his projects. So this was the first. So it was a really fun, really lovely project to work on. Really challenging as well, a steep learning curve. And of course, very similar to Shackleton. You know, I had a full-time job while trying to illustrate and design this all outside of work. So all the evenings, all the weekends, trying to keep busy, tip away, keep on top of the deadline. And then it was released this April. So it's out in the shops now, available.
Very good. I haven't got a copy yet, but I will. I promise you, I'll get one now in the next 2 weeks. At all the bookshops, I've one particular favourite bookshop called Woodbine Books in Cullen here. It's a good friend of ours, so I'm not going to buy it anywhere else. I'm buying it there, you know. But no, congratulations on that. So that's a completely different format. I've actually never done a picture book, and I would love to do it. So what were the challenges? How did you pick the format, or what were the choices on that?
Myself and the other graphic designer in Mercier and the commissioning editor, when we were first debating whether we go ahead with the project, we all went to Cork City and we visited all of the bookshops. And we were looking at all the formats and seeing what worked and what might work for this project. And and there was a lot of debate, and and we had a couple of meetings about the whole thing, and then I went away and I did, some test passes, because it's all poems. So I took a couple of the poems and I did a few sample pages. And we decided on the style, and we decided on the colors and everything, which were quite distinctive, and we decided on the scale. And then from that point, I was pretty much left to my own devices. Because we had the manuscript. So I basically took that home and worked away on that for 6 months. And yeah, I guess the challenges were just, there was a bit of, self-doubt as well, because it was such a big project. So got over that very quickly, because you've got to meet the deadline, you've got to just keep chipping away. And then just keeping motivated, keeping persistent about it throughout the 6 months.
Yeah, that's a big thing with us as well. I think you can be absolutely overwhelmed by the task, but there's a part where you just have to knuckle down and do it. So you have to get over that fear very, very quickly to get things done. But that's very interesting as well, because we did the same thing with Shackleton, Paula, didn't we? Didn't you do a few bookshop visits to figure out the format?
Yes, to see what other publishers who were publishing graphic novels were doing, or graphic books. It wasn't such a surprise, I think, that the Collins Press took on with your book because of the subject matter. Because it's one thing I would say to anybody who's watching this, who's an aspiring writer or who wants to get published, you do have to do your research before you contact the publisher to see if they might take on with your book. Because, for instance, I mean, it sounds so commonsensical, but you'd be surprised at how many people get this part wrong. There's no point in taking your historical novel to a publisher who only publishes educational books, for instance, or who only publishes non-fiction. Because the Collins Press was already publishing in the area of Antarctic exploration, we had the sales and marketing network already set up. So we knew where your book would be selling into. And it wasn't like we had to go and research that and start again from scratch. So your book actually fitted in, even though the graphic novel form was completely new for us, it did actually fit in very well with our subject areas of where we were already publishing and already selling into. So that actually worked out quite well for us.
I think just from my own point of view, I'm kind of realising how lucky we were as well because of that.
There's a lot of luck involved, but I'm just listening to you all here, and what you're saying, it's what successful people do. You get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And again, for anybody who's watching, very, very few authors are full-time writers of any kind. Michael Smith is the exception in my experience, almost unique in that he's a journalist. So he's already writing for a living. But very, very few people who publish books are actually doing that full time. They've all got another job. They've all got a day job. With the Collins Press, for instance, we've published an awful lot of cycling guides and walking guides and adventure guides. So the people who are writing these books for us are the ones who are leading walking guides in the Burren, for instance, and places like that. So the writing has to be done outside of the 9 to 5.
That's a very good point, and that's something I've been trying to cover here on these lockdown chat series. That people have this, and Alice, you know this as well. Like, people have this thing: oh, you go to our college and you're not making a living from it, and it's like, oh yeah, we told you so. Why did you do something that's crazy or creative? You know, I've kind of been sticking to my guns and realizing, and that's a great point, Paula, that there's lots of people that don't actually make their living from the books, that they make their livings in different things, and that's a very good point. And that goes through to lots of even top illustrators that I know of. They all have the graphic design career, they have the jobs coming in, they have the different stuff to pay the bills, and then they have this sideline. And that's true for a lot of people. There's very, very few people that are full-time illustrators, full-time writers. So I'm absolutely delighted you said that from a publisher's point of view. But just from a publisher's point of view, does that create challenges? Is it like, I know lots of stuff was email and...
I'll tell you where it creates the challenges. Because I remember doing, when I was working for Gilland Macmillan, one of the common complaints in all of the departments was, oh God, authors, who have them? They're so difficult to deal with. So we got this person in, Alice, you're smiling at that. We got a person in to give us a day course on how to deal with the difficult author. And it came down to, how do you communicate? The authors are not being difficult. It's that the publishers were having unrealistic expectations of people who have full-time jobs doing something else. So the first thing to do is to establish, are you a teacher, for instance? When can we contact you? We know we can't phone you at any time of the day or night. So tell us, when is a good time to contact you? Would you rather we phoned you or emailed you? And just to explain as well that because publishers do what they do all day, every day, we don't think twice about it, and we forget how little people know about it. And if I could tell you a story about when I started out in publishing first, it'll explain how little people should be expected to know what happens in a publishing company. My first job in publishing was in London. I got a job with the Macmillan Press, and it was all very glamorous. I was working in an office. It's not far from Covent Garden. I could pop down there from a lunch break, and it was all very exciting. But Macmillan would run an induction course for all new staff twice a year. So anyone who'd come in the previous 6 months was sent down to the Basingstoke office, which was where they had their warehouse. So a not very glamorous part of the UK, and a very not glamorous prefab hut for this induction course. And the first person they sent in to talk to all the fresh-faced young faces that had come in was the distribution and production director for the global Macmillan group, because this is like a worldwide company. They have publishing houses in every country in the world virtually, and he was in charge of production and distribution for the entire global network. So he was a very important person, and he didn't just walk into a room, he sort of exploded into it. So we were all terrified of him when he came in. And he looked around at us and he said, well, congratulations, you're all now working for Macmillan. Tell me, what is it we do? What is it you think we do? And we all just looked at the floor and nobody wanted to answer, because I was thinking frantically, will we publish books? But that was clearly too obvious an answer. So eventually Mike answered the question himself. He said, we're a business, we're here to make money. And that's what publishers do. So once you understand that, you understand where they're coming from, because some authors, I've seen some authors, they get this idea that the publisher doesn't want their book to succeed. Why would you put that terrible cover on my book? And once you understand that the publisher needs your book to succeed, they are literally in it for the money. It should help explain an awful lot of things. But given that Macmillan felt the need to run an induction course for people who had maybe been working for them for 6 months, and even we didn't know what we were supposed to be doing, how can we expect anybody else to know? So it's to be aware that nobody really knows what happens in a publishing house, apart from the people who are in there, and sometimes not even that. And when I started out with the Collins Press, for instance, one of the first things Con asked me to do was to draw up a list of what happens next notes for authors, because a lot of our authors have been first-time authors. Sometimes they were fairly seasoned authors, but maybe had published with another publishing house. And even though we know that the steps we follow are probably pretty much the same as what every other publishing house does, the authors don't know that. And if they have this list of the steps that are going to happen, it can be reassuring. It's something they can refer to, which means they don't need to be ringing you or emailing you 3 or 4 times a day. Just, wait, you said this, but did you mean that? So yeah, I hope that helps.
No, thank you very much for that. So Alice, do you anything you want to add to that? Just your experience and other things and publishing and from graphic design, from your own personal experience, like give us a bit of insight into that, please.
You do have to have quite a lot of patience with people. It's interesting that you bring up communication, because it's one of the because everybody is doing quite different roles. Because me as a graphic designer, I would be dealing with historians, and I'd be dealing with teachers, and I'd be dealing with chefs and things. So like they don't necessarily have a design mentality or the design foundation. So you have to have a bit of patience and sort of, there's a little bit of education there where you're trying to keep them informed on why you're making the decisions you're making and that kind of thing. Because as you say, like you always do have the author's best interest in mind and you want the book to succeed, but sometimes you do have to provide a rationale for why you're making the decisions you're making. And it's an interesting, there are some interesting conversations to be had on that front.
Yeah, is there any particular kind of marketing avenue and stuff like people had this, I don't know, notion of what the book is, and we say no, we're putting it this. Is there any kind of clash of interest, if you like, or what you were doing, what they had in mind, or not to point out any particular one, or not to mention anyone, but is there any, would that be a thing that would happen?
It does happen. It does definitely happen.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Example.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I don't want you to get in trouble or anything like that. But just in general, like just so you're part of the production team and you're looking at kind of the marketing. So as Paula was saying, this is a business. We want to sell your book. We have to make this sellable. Is that a word? Correct me on that.
Yeah.
Hey. But like, there's a different thing. Marketing a book is very, very different than illustrating a book, and the two necessarily aren't the right thing. From yourself that come from kind of indie comics and stuff, we kind of wouldn't necessarily think of that until we do the bigger projects. But yeah, is there any kind of like 3 years doing covers, a massive learning curve for you? Is there any kind of marketing thing, any little points for people starting out to look out for, what you think, or anything like that?
I think one thing that you need to be aware of is you have to kind of learn to trust people to fulfill their side of the bargain. So like if a historian comes back to you and tells you that, oh, this is objectively wrong, it doesn't matter if it's pretty, if it's wrong, then it's wrong. You've got to change it. But likewise, if you have a rationale and there's like a reason that you're positioning things the way you're positioning them, whether it be for the production side of it or the printing side of it, or even just from when you're doing the graphic design, you're often thinking in grids, you're often thinking about like the balance, you're thinking of the composition, and there's a lot going on in the background that someone who doesn't have a design background would be aware of. So you have to be able to just argue your corner, but also have faith that their perspective is also valuable, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. No, that's exactly what I kind of on about.
I get wary of someone who doesn't have any foundation whatsoever in graphic design who comes to me with decisive ideas without being open to suggestion.
Yeah. I know, that's good. No, I don't want you to get in trouble or anything. But yeah, I know myself and yourself, Paula, we had a bit of a journey doing the cover. Like, I think the cover of Shackleton had, like, people don't realize this as well, like there must have been like 17 different versions of coming back and changing this and changing that, and I love the experience, by the way. I'm not giving out about it, but I suppose like from an artist's point of view, you do the illustration and you send it on, and then you realise this thing is coming back. And I remember one particular thing you were saying to me, and I just couldn't understand it. I didn't know what it was. And you simply screenshot it and put a little note on it, and I was like, now I get you, I think it was something to do with turning on text or something like that. Something was kind of spiking out. But yeah, like I know from Shackleton's point of view, like I had never used InDesign before. I remember that was a bit of a shock to the system for yourself and myself. But lots of a deep learning curve for the putting the book together. Do you have any thoughts on that, Paula? Anything you remember?
Just InDesign is it's my favorite package for page makeup. I'm always surprised when a cover designer designs something in Illustrator or in Photoshop. I'd always use InDesign or Quark, just because it's what they're geared up for. And my personal preference is for InDesign over Quark, because probably because I've used it more. But it's exactly what it's geared up for. It's very it's just so clever when it comes to putting books together. And actually, if anybody who's watching again is interested in getting looking to get a career in with a publishing house, the way to do it is not like me and just fall into it pretty much by accident. You would get a college degree first. Doesn't really matter what subject it's in, because having a specialty like science or history or philosophy or something like that could actually be quite useful as an editor, for instance. But you can do postgraduate studies in Galway, for instance. NUIG run a taught master's in publishing studies, and it's almost expected nowadays, if you're applying to a publishing house, that you will have something like a qualification like that. But I do know that it's one of the criticisms of the course in Galway that they give you an introduction, I think, to both Quark and InDesign, but they don't give you enough practice in it. And because they can't. I mean, they can't cover absolutely everything in 1 year. I think it's a 1 year master's. So I think you literally only get 1 or 2 days working with InDesign. But it has to be said, these packages generally have very good online tutorials, so you can teach yourself to a large degree of what's required.
Absolutely. So just one point, of anyone that might have a book idea and they're looking to send it to a publisher, what kind of advice could you give them, Paula?
Well, the first thing is to make sure that you're contacting the right publisher, and make sure they're already publishing in your subject area, because that's the commonest mistake that people make. Another thing is to be prepared to wait as well, because most publishers will take at least 8 weeks to get back to you, because they just have such a volume of work to be getting through, as well as volume of unsolicited manuscripts to get through. But going back to what I was saying about publishers being businesses, an awful lot of scripts aren't actually unsolicited manuscripts at all. Because they're a business, they have to stay in business. They can't be waiting for your script to turn up on their desk. They'll actually have gone out and commissioned authors. So if you're a journalist who's writing in a particular subject area, you might get approached by a publisher to write a book about this story that's been big in the news that you've been covering. Or if you're a teacher in school and you're known to be good at your particular subject, you might get approached by one of the sales reps who's been selling books into your school to write your book on maths for the Reading Cert for next year. But once you get a contract with a publisher, there is this lead time into publishing, because any publisher at this particular moment in time, their list is probably completely full for 2021, and they'll already have an idea of what they're going to publish for 2022. So a lot of people, when they do get a contract from a publisher, they're very surprised that, okay, I'm contacting you today to say, yes, we'd like to publish your book, but it's going to be spring 2022. And I think that's what drives quite a number of people to self-publishing, because they've written the book and they don't want to wait. And they don't understand why they should have to wait. And they think, well, surely if you're a professional publisher, you could knock this out in 6 weeks. And I mean, yes, we could if we down tools and concentrated on nothing else, but we do actually have, maybe 35, 40, 50, 100 other books to publish before then. So
that's another big point you said as well. Like, lots of publishers work 6 months in advance.
Oh, at the very least.
So all the books that are coming out October, November for Christmas market have been worked on, wrapped up since February and March, and people don't realize that either. So that's a big point.
I mean, another thing from the marketing point of view is that the likes of Easton's, the very big chains, they need your covers. They need the cover designs 3 months in advance of publication. So they already have everything for Christmas, because again, there's such a volume of stuff coming through. They can't just handle it all in a day or two. They need it all hugely in advance. So frequently, I don't know, Alice, if you have found this, but frequently we have had books with covers and the author might not actually have finished the script. That's not, I shouldn't say that's often, that happens occasionally, but the cover runs way, way, way ahead of the text pages.
Yeah, I would very often be working on a book cover while the editor is on the other side of the room editing the text.
Yeah.
They need to be done well in advance to allow for being included in catalogs and things that would come out seasonally. So.
Very good. So just yourself, Gavin. So you did you self-published a few comic books, and you had the experience of Shackleton. Is there any advice you'd give on people that were starting out, either as a writer or self-publishing comics, or what to do, what not to do, or?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I definitely experienced, and I suppose, look, a phrase for it is writer's block, but I don't know if I ever experienced full writer's block, but there's certainly going to be times that you're going to be busy and you're going to feel that you're not getting through things as quickly as you can. What I found helped me was that sometimes I'd be in the middle of a short story and you're not really getting to where you need to go with it. So I would go and work on something else for a couple of days and then come back to it. You know what I mean? Try and come at it again at another time. But it's something I actually read in a book a long time ago about writing, was that no matter what, keep writing, because I think that it's a bit like exercise and jogging. And at the minute, I actually went for a jog 2 days ago, and I haven't jogged since the 23rd of April. Now, I went for my jog and I'm fine, and I'm a wee bit sore still after that. But what I found was it's much, much easier to keep doing something than to go away from it for a while and then to try to get back into it. So anyone that's looking to get into writing or to do anything around writing, I would say keep writing. Even if sometimes what you're writing is not necessarily what you're trying to write, but keep trying to write something so that you're continually, exercising your brain and you're continually doing things. And yeah, look, to go back to the point that I made earlier, if you have a full-time job, well then you do need to figure out, are you a morning person or are you an evening person? And I know, David, you would have done a lot of your artwork at night time, whereas I would have done a hell of a lot of my work writing in the morning. And so you figure out what suits you best and make that time for yourself that's outside of your normal routine, and get stuck into it. But yeah, look, life will get in the way and things will throw barriers up against you. I suppose what helped me a lot about the Shackleton thing at a time it didn't feel like it was helping me was that we had pressure from Collins Press and from other people to do things. So it wasn't just that, like Innocent Tales, where I could just say, you know what, I can leave that off for another month or two because it's my own self-publicized product. It's we now are working with a publisher, and there was pressure coming. And I think even for myself, I'm definitely a person who works better to having a deadline. So I suppose the advice in that is if you don't have a deadline from somebody else, maybe try and set yourself a deadline and give yourself that wee bit of pressure to get things done by. But again, look, different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Just from my point of view, yeah, I work evenings. I work shift work in my job. Well, I always find kind of evening times is the way I work best. So it's normally when everyone's gone to bed, and you can stick on the headphones and you can just put a few hours. But yeah, like just from my point of view, from Margaret's point of view, I always struggle kind of the first hour, and sometimes I give myself that little bit of check the emails, check Facebook, check whatever, and then just go, right, I give myself a kind of deadline of half an hour or so of that. And if you're doing too much of that, then you need to switch it off, or if you need to just do it. But I do that kind of relaxing thing, and I check the emails and stuff just to make sure if I'm working with a writer or something that nothing came through that I need to look at or anything needs my attention. But I do believe the deadline is a massive thing. And even if you're self-publishing or doing stuff yourself, you need to give yourself that kind of deadline, or else you just, a job that could take 6 pages, you could spend 3 years doing it, and it doesn't necessarily make it better. But where you get it finished and it's done and it's completed, and then you move on to the next piece. And that's definitely something that myself and Paul have been working on this new book as well that we're doing on Dr. Aidan McCarthy. That's the sort of thing that we're doing as well. You need to kind of, once the pages come through and you set yourself a deadline, you think, right, we need to send this out in the next month or whatever, and just kind of work to that. But just from yourself, Alice, have you any advice for anyone starting out, whether graphic design or illustrations or whatever?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what has been said. But coming back to what Gavin was saying about like just getting into a routine of like keeping going, like I would be an artist, and I think it's good to just have a habit of drawing, and you don't even necessarily. I wouldn't always have a deadline for myself. I think I just have a routine. Like I draw every day, but I'd say I show people 10-20% of what I draw. And like I don't draw everything to completion either. I just, it's important to just enjoy it and draw for myself and just keep making things that I'm enjoying anyway, because that will all help when a deadline does come in and when I do need to make like decisive design decisions, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely no. But yeah,
And I think you could fall into like the pursuit of perfection and not achieve anything or not make any progress. Whereas if you're aiming for progress, then you're always getting better and you're always getting quicker and more efficient. And I think that's really valuable as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Just from my own point of view, I suppose not really deadline, but that kind of, I suppose that kind of professionalism that you need to keep at it, you need to keep going. Well, the deadline, like you said, right, I need it by Monday, and you don't get it till a week or two. That's okay if someone doesn't need it, but you do need that. Like I would work on the comic book pages and stuff, and I would actually leave the stuff there for a couple of weeks or whatever, and before back, like even myself, the project we're doing with Paula, I go on the finished page, like just left there. It was a map of France and a map of Dunkirk, but I just left that. But I just kind of, I know how I'm going to put it together, and I'm kind of leaving it there till it needs to be done, and then I just tackle it another day. But thanks a million, guys. That was all really, really good. I'm going to have Margaret here chatting all about the Shackleton Museum. So just from myself and Stephen and June Fest and all, we'd like to thank you all for coming aboard. And in Celtic Con, I know, Paula, you visited us there in Port last year. First time myself and Paula actually met.
Yeah.
So that was brilliant. We were walking around, she was looking around, looked for me, and someone said, he's around there with a high-vis jacket on him. And of course I took off the high-vis jacket. Paula had done 2 laps in the venue before we found each other. But myself and Alice, like, we worked on the book for a couple of months, and we've never met each other, and it was all kind of done by email and things like that. And the first time we met was at the launch of the book. So that was really, really cool. And I suppose that's the cool thing about design work and writing, that you can collaborate with people. You don't have to be in the same town or in the same building or anything like that, you know?
Yeah, and I suppose we done it the old-fashioned way, Dave. We had our first, I suppose, strategic planning meeting in a pub.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that has to be done as well. I know the Shackleton Museum, and a lot of the best work that goes on happens in the O'Brien's in the tie there. Actually, that's where Alice watches the O'Brien's. I just remember that as well.
After the launch, yeah.
It has to be done. It's a landmark in the tie. Are you there, Margaret? Oh, looks like Margaret's after freezing.
Yeah, hi Dave, yes, still here.
Oh, Dan, I thought your camera was freezing.
No, good, very interesting now, very interesting.
Thanks a million. So, Margaret, just let us know a bit about the Shackleton Museum and what's going on with it.
Yeah, just on that, just from the conversation I was listening to, though, I think Shackleton's a great inspirational, for a subject matter as well. I mean, it was everybody's dream to be an explorer and to explore the unknown. So I think he's a great role model for people, and that want to do something that other people haven't done. So there's great stories then to do these expeditions as well. And because, I mean, he failed at some and then succeeded in other things. The museum here now is a kind of a celebration of Shackleton, and it kind of gives the story of where he was born in Kilkee, which is just out the road here. And then we also will have the place in which he died, the Quest Cabin as well. So it's going to be a kind of birth to death story of Shackleton. lot of the expeditions he would have done, like the Nimrod expedition as well, when he got 97 miles to the pole, we would have the harness and the sledge to do with that as well, and remnants of a biscuit that would have been found in a cigarette case. He was famous for setting up different businesses to fund his expeditions, because he had to get some funding to go ahead and do things like that. But the main one, I think, and that people know a lot about is the endurance, and you've covered that in your graphic novel, then the James Caird, and that was a feat that no one kind of could survival, definitely, of the fittest, but definitely.
I kind of explained to people, and it's kind of explained to me that the modern equivalent of what Ernest Shackleton is like going to the moon. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It was like the lads going to the moon and getting stuck there, like the no way back. That's kind of the people kind of make that comparison, and it's very true. And at the time, like, there was radio signal, but they were nowhere near where they wanted to be, and it's just the way it works. So, like, even when I was drawing all those ice caps and all those craters and stuff, I was kind of imagining the moon and some of the compositions of the ice and stuff. I was kind of getting a sense of that kind of abandonness. But just from my idea of the book, and like, we said, oh, we're doing a graphic novel on Ernest Shackleton, and we had this where they likes the scene where they're coming down the mountain. And I say, right, I'm going to get into his head, and I'm going to show all the fear and the panic and whatever. And then you get the book, and you're going, like, 4 panels to tell all that story. So it completely changes everything. But look, we get a sense of the adventure. Yeah, that was kind of the tone of the book. It was kind of an adventure story version of it.
Definitely.
Well, tell us a bit about the cabin, please, Margaret.
Yeah, the cabin now at the moment is down in Letterfrack, and conservation work is just completed on it. So the redevelopment plans for the museum now, because of the COVID, were put on hold for a bit. So in 2021, we're hoping that the actual redevelopment of the building will actually commence. So it'll be a whole reconstruction of the building inside. You'll have the story of Shackleton, as I say, and you'll have the Elephant Island part, the James Caird. You'll also have these different expeditions that he would have actually done as well. But you'll also be able to feel and experience, because we'll have it kind of interactive as well, so that people will be able to actually get a sense of how cold it was, what hardship was there as well. And also we'll have research facilities here then as well, where people can actually do some research on climate change, on how they done it. There'll be diaries here belonging to Shackleton as well, and Emily's diaries are here at the moment now. I'm actually attempting to transcribe them at the moment. So I have the magnifying glass out and trying to figure out what word is what. But as I say, the whole build hopefully now will come together in 2021. And but it's an inspirational story, and it's great for the county as well, being a local hero from County Kildare. And we actually got museum status in 2016. So that puts us in a position where we actually can borrow from other polar museums, like the Fram Museum in Norway, which is Amundsen's museum. And then you have the Scots Polar in Cambridge, and everyone knows of Scott as well. And so, like, we're in a unique position there as well. And with people like yourselves promoting him locally and through, writing and books, and we have musical plays, it's actually after grown momentous in the last couple of years. So
Of course, the Shackletons out there as well, facing south.
Yes, yeah, you have, yeah. And his granddaughter is a great patron of the museum as well, which is great to have that link. And then you've also got his cousin then, Jonathan Shackleton. So you still have those that can tell the stories, and you can kind of relate to them as well, because you still have the human aspect of it.
Absolutely, and you have some. I just love the little community there in Athy. Likes of Joe Farrell and stuff. Just that man is absolutely polar explorer, Antarctic. I don't know what you call it. He's a human computer for all that stuff. But And
That's
of course,
something that'll be missed now this year, because the October weekend was always a 4-day event. So you would have had, an exhibit we would have got from overseas as well. And then you'd have the drama, you'd have the film, but you'd have the lectures. But also you'd have the people that are coming here for the last 20 years would actually reconnect, and they're old friends, like you'd have them going over to O'Brien's for the pint, be back over then to the museum for the lecture. And as you say, you've got people that like Joe Farrell and Kevin, Jameson, Frank. You've got a lot of people. You've got Jack and Bob Burton as well. You'd have Bob Headland. So they're all real kind of patriots of Shackleton, but have come to love Athy. And Athy, I must say, gives them a great welcome.
That's what I try to explain to people that aren't really into Shackleton, that the weekend is much, much more than that. Like, there's amazing lectures on climate change,
Yes.
and there's different explorers. And I remember a couple of years ago did a great insight into the Franklin expedition.
Yes.
And actually had the explorer that actually found the ships. He had them the year before given a lecture, so it was really high quality stuff. But look, maybe the online thing might be an element of the future, that you can put some of those lectures online, and even after the event, that people can watch back and learn as well. So that might be something that COVID might actually help you with in the future.
Exactly, David, and I think we'll be reaching out to a lot more people that can't travel either, to it every year. So it goes worldwide once you have it virtual. So no, there's good aspects to it as well. And then you'll have different people that will be able to join in a conversation, ask a question as well, and maybe put forward some suggestions as well, maybe finds that they have found as well. So it's another way of reaching an audience we would have never reached before.
That's it. I've met loads and loads of friends from it, like myself and Eugene Furlong that we mentioned, and of course Eugene actually found the cabin. And just to explain to people that don't know what the cabin is, the cabin is actually the cabin of the Quest ship, which was Shackleton's final expedition, and he actually died on it, and he actually had a heart attack or heart problems in the actual cabin. He actually died in the cabin. So that cabin was actually, when the boat was decommissioned, it was taken off and ended up in someone's garden in Norway. And of course, Eugene went to Norway and was having a few pints in a pub, and someone told him about this cabin. So he actually went on a bit of an expedition himself to find the cabin. And over the last few years, that it actually made its way to Athy, didn't it?
It did, yeah. It came the whole way across from Oslo to Athy, yeah. And actually the owner of it, Ulf, came here on a visit as well to visit the museum, and he put his own pint in O'Brien's pub across the way. And as you say, Eugene actually was instrumental as well. He's an avid Shackleton fan and Polar fan as well. But that was a journey in itself to come from Oslo down to Letterfrack in Galway. So it's down there now in the conservation, down there with Sven at the moment. So we're hoping now that it'll have its final destination here in Athy in 2021.
Just quickly on that point, the preservation or the work on it actually has taken years, isn't it? It's like it takes years to climatize something that old to make it from outside inside. I had no idea about that. I thought you can just put it into a shed and leave it there for 6 months and it'll be all right. But no, it's a long process, and the restoration is a couple of years, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's like everything. It looks simple and it's made to look simple, but the background to it now is there's a lot more to it. You'd have to control the temperature and the environment around it as well. And also you had to source the wallpaper as well, the original wallpaper. Try and source that back as well and preserve there's a kind of a little sink unit as well, and his bunk bed is there as well. So there's a lot of work done on it, and then the preservation of it alone. So it's a long process, but as only the expert know how hard it is, they make it look simple.
Absolutely, and just one part that I learned about the cabin, and I suppose this is indicative of Ernest Shackleton, that he shared the cabin with Frank Wilde, who was actually on the the endurance expedition in our book. But one of the really, really cool things is the cabin was absolutely, almost mathematically split in half, and half of Frank Boyle and half of Shackleton. And to me, that just gives the personality of Shackleton, that's the way he was. He was just, well, it was airs and graces in different parts of his life, but on the expeditions, he broke rank. There was no kind of naval merchant thing. It was all very, very different. He was very hands-on, and that's an element that I'd love to. But listen, guys, thanks.
Sorry, he was a fair man, and he knew his men. He knew their strengths and their qualities, and he was able to actually use it to an advantage, especially like when they were all isolated and stranded at that time. So it's just part of a trait that people have or haven't got, but thankfully now he had.
Oh, that's fantastic. And listen, guys, thanks very much for your time and your help. And I know you're all very busy and people are working away and stuff. But listen, we thank you very much on behalf of June Fest and Celtic Con, and of course the Thai Heritage Shackleton Museum. We'd like to thank you all for being part of the chat today. So guys, listen, thanks very much, and we'd love to chat to you again, and hopefully we'll see you at some of the events in the Thai, or Celtic Con events, or June Fest events in the future. So guys, thanks very much for taking time out, and it was great chatting with you and seeing you all again. Thanks,
Thank you, David. Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.